Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Dawn Reinhardt-Wood. Hi, Jen. And I'm joined here with my colleague, Jen Sperduto. We are from Rutgers School of Health Professions, Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. And today we're here for one of our prep seminars, Psychiatric Rehabilitation. Does anybody remember? Education program. And we're here today to talk about ACEs, Adverse Childhood Events, and Resilience. And we're really excited today because we have yet again another speaker from the hospital system, recently retired. And this is a topic that she has a special interest in and has been delivering this topic to individuals at Ancora for about 5 years now as a part of new employee orientation. With her retirement, we really wanted to capture this talk and present it to all of you. It is recorded so that we have this as a resource, and maybe it'll generate some interest for additional trainings moving forward. So we'd love to get your feedback on this training and additional ones that are related to trauma, ACEs, and resilience. So today, we want to get started by going through a couple of housekeeping items. So this is presented in partnership by Rutgers University and New Jersey Department of Health, Division of Behavioral Health Services. It's an interactive training. We encourage you to ask questions. You can just put your questions in the chat throughout this session, or you can raise your hand. And Jen is going to be looking and monitoring the chat and the participant list. So if you want to raise a question or make a comment, please feel free and we will highlight you. And Kathy will be stopping from time to time to address your questions. We also hope to have a little bit of time at the end, at the conclusion of her presentation. A recording of this webinar will be available after the presentation at the Rutgers SHPRI website, which Jen will also put into the chat so that you can easily navigate there.
I just wanted to add also, if you're using the chat box to communicate to everyone, you can change your, there's a note in the chat box that says to everyone or to panelists. I would change it to everybody. It says like to everyone or to hosts and panelists. So change it to everyone unless you want it specifically just to me or Dawn. And then that way everybody can see your questions or your responses. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. We do like to mention as a disclaimer, because we are soliciting presenters from across the hospital system, and at some point we hope from the community as well, that the PrEP is an online forum for a variety of topics relevant to the state psychiatric hospital staff. And while we, Rutgers and DBHS, are co-sponsors of this program, the PrEP webinars are primarily peer presented. So as such, content is independently developed by the presenters each month. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any of the entities they represent. So with all that legal stuff out of the way, we also want to let you know that the session is being recorded. So please just know that for your own sake. And this will be available to you following the presentation's conclusion. So today's presenter is Kathy Engstrom. She's a registered nurse with a lot of experience in the forensic units at Ancora. She is the former training supervisor at Ancora Psychiatric Hospital and was with Ancora for 34 years up until the end of this year. So we're really excited to have her with us. She truly is, I think, really in tune with ACEs, with how and why we should be sensitive to adverse childhood events and trauma as we continue to serve people through the mental health system, and especially in our state psychiatric hospitals here in New Jersey. And one more slide, and then I'll turn it over to Kathy. In this webinar, we're going to be walking through the Adverse Childhood Experiences questionnaire. And folks will be provided an opportunity to complete your own ACE screenings. We'll explore how ACEs can affect long-term development through childhood and adulthood, and discuss the importance of positive relationships, where we can find them, and their role in building resilience throughout our development through childhood and adulthood. I do want to say that because this can be a sensitive topic for some people, if you are feeling triggered, if you're feeling like you need to take a break, if you feel like you need to walk away, that is perfectly fine. We are not going to force participation. There will be a poll at some point. It is up to you. The poll is completely voluntary, what information you would like to share. So please know that we understand that this could be a sensitive topic. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kathy with a shift of my laptop. And yes, we have been COVID tested.
Hi, everybody. I just want to go over a couple things. How do I move this so I can read it? Sorry about that. Okay. All right, so the learning objectives for today is to identify potential ACEs in childhood. And ACEs, again, is adverse childhood experiences. We're going to identify the impact of ACEs on development of a child. We're going to identify our own ACE score. And we're going to review the role of resilience in mitigating trauma. So that's what we're going to do today. Okay, so the ACE score, it's a large study through Kaiser Permanente Health System and the CDC. It was for 17,500 participants did the study, and it was over a period of 25 years. The checklist contains 10 adverse events occurring prior to age 18. So if you got born and you made it to 18, you have an ACE score. It's linked to lifetime prevalence of psychiatric and medical conditions. And we are not completely predictive. We can mitigate the consequences through early intervention. And that's one of the things that I would like to do. And moving forward is to possibly do this for teachers in the school system, so we don't have to wait to try to help adults who are suffering from the effects of adverse childhood experiences. Maybe we can identify it and then hopefully nip it in the bud. So that's what I would like to do moving forward. Whether it's going to happen or not, that's another story. So that's what we're going to do today. So getting started, can I go? Yeah, you can go. I'm gonna go back. Hold on, give me a minute. So the ACE study, it's an adverse childhood experiences. The ACE score is a tally of different types of abuse, neglect, and other hallmarks of a rough childhood. And there are 10 childhood traumas measured in the ACE study. 5 of them are personal: physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, and physical neglect. Back up. That's all right. One more. And emotional neglect, and 5 are related to other family members. So according to the ACE study, the rougher your childhood, the higher your score is likely to be, and the higher your risk for health issues and choosing to engage in risky behaviors. And these are experiences that happen prior to 18 years of age. So the ACE study is the largest, most important public health study you never heard of, because most people have never heard of this. In the 5 years I was doing this for Ancora in general orientation, and I did it for all the nurses and all the HS staff there, and all the 90% of the rehab staff. Most people never heard of the ACEs study. It began in an obesity clinic, and the study was compiled over 25 years and involved researchers from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And like I said, it involved more than 17,500 subjects. So just to get started, I just wanted to let you know that I'm sure that, or I would hope that everybody has seen the video that Dr. Nadine Burke does, Nadine Burke Harris, I think. She does it on a TED Talks, and it talks about the ACE study. And in part of her talk, she talks about the flight or fight system, and she kind of dummies it down for us people who don't understand the hypothalamus and the amygdala, You can't even say it, let alone understand what it was. But she talks about the flight or fight response and how it can be beneficial, especially, and she goes into it where if there's a bear, if you're in the woods and there's a bear, and then, but what if the bear comes home every night? And every time I listen to that, I get chills running up and down my spine, and I feel a certain way because my father was that bear that came home every night, and you never knew what he was going to bring home with him. So that that has a lot to do with it, and it kind of explains where I'm going to be going with this. So, okay, this is the experiential part of my talk, which comes with a warning label. And this is a simulation lab exercise where we are going to complete the ACE score together. And I will use my personal trauma history as a subject to calculate the ACE score. The purpose, help me, Jesus. The purpose of my using my personal information is not for you to feel sorry for me, but it's to bring to life the following trauma-informed care learning objectives and hopefully provide a reason to take this material seriously and better understand how your role can be, how critical your role can be in a child's life and future well-being. And to be respectful to all of you and help you feel safe through this exercise, please hear me clearly and know the following. Your ACEs test is your business. It's nobody else's business. And when we do the poll, this is going to be an anonymous poll. Don't worry about me. I have thoroughly worked through what happened to me as a kid and find myself today to be a very happy person most days, with a great passion for helping improve the lives of children and our coworkers and our patients. And this exercise is intended to help educators and caregivers identify the problems within themselves and help people who have experienced adverse childhood experiences in the past. And we also hope to promote self-awareness among those of you who have personally suffered and survived trauma. This exercise may be upsetting to some of you. It may unexpectedly cause you to remember and think about things you have spent a long time trying not to think about. At the end of the training, I will be available to debrief with you and arrange for additional support if you need it. This part of the talk is important and many report it to be helpful. But like Dawn said, if you have a problem, if you get triggered, feel free to get up and walk away or take a minute for yourself. Because if you feel learning about and examining childhood trauma in a public forum is not something you are ready to do, know that this is what we're going to do. So that's what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the adverse childhood experiences study, and I'm going to use my personal information for that. So we're going to go to question number 1. So question number 1 is, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? So for me, that was a yes. So that's a 1. If you answer yes, you get a 1. If you answer no, it's a 0. So you keep track. So we're going to ask you at the end what your score is. So number 1, like I said, is a yes for me. So that's a 1. Growing up, my nickname was Fatty, and that was the nicest thing I was ever called. I was called stupid all the time, so much so that I thought I was stupid. I'm going to say bad words in this presentation, not because I have Tourette's or anything, but because it helps tell my story, and it kind of is. If you know me, it's who I am. So my father, when I was a little kid, my father told me that I would fuck up a wet dream. When I was a little kid, I didn't know what a wet dream was, but I knew I would fuck it up. And I knew I would fuck it up because I was stupid. And why did I think I was stupid? It was because people told me I was stupid all the time. My father all the time, my mother all the time. When I got out of high school and I started working at a factory, and I knew I was stupid. but I knew I was smarter than putting chapstick pieces in a machine and putting the design on them. So I went to Gloucester County College and I wanted to see what I wanted to be when I grow up. And I looked at all the curriculum and everything, and I hate math. And back then, nursing had no math in it. So I decided I'm going to be a nurse. I was very excited. I took my stuff home to my mom and dad, and I told them, they were at the dinner table, and I stood there and I said, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to be a nurse. And my dad was like, you should probably stay at that factory. You got benefits. It's a good job. And he told me I would never finish, which is why I finished, I think. At my house, things were thrown at you at the dinner table. If you didn't eat right, if you didn't eat all your food, if you didn't finish, if you gave somebody a dirty look, you got things thrown at you. Knives, forks, spoons, food. In that family, that's where I learned how to use the F word. And now I can say it as a noun, a verb, an adjective, adverb. I don't even have to use any other people words, but the F word. And in my family, no one ever encouraged you or thought you could do anything special. So for me, out of 1, I have 1. Number 2, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? So for me, that was a yes. So that's another one. So out of 2, I have 2. One time I was slapped in the face so hard by my father that I was knocked to the ground. I got up, I ran up the steps to go to my room to get away from him. He followed me up the steps. He lit a whole book of matches, threw the lit book of matches in my room and shut the door and left. Another time my mom slapped me in the face so hard that it left a handprint on my face. And I was sent to school like that. And I'm 60 years old. Back then, I don't know if there was DIFUS, but nobody was calling them. And I walked around in school with a handprint on my face most of the day, and nobody said anything. So I guess back then they thought you needed a tune-up and you got it, and nothing else was said. And like I said, utensils and food and objects were thrown at us at the dinner table. And if they couldn't get to you during the day to hit you, they threw something at you. So out of 2, I have 2. Number 3.
Kathy, do you mind if I stop you for a second? There was a question that came in that asked, how is often determined? Like, is it subjective to what someone perceives as traumatic? Like, how do you define often?
How I define often? A couple times a week. At the dinner table, a lot. And it depends. Here's the thing. It depends. If you could be hit every day or thrown something at every day or slapped around every day, or it could be one major time that really affects you. So I can't say it has to happen 3 times a week or 4 times a week, but it's how that affects you. And that's what I think matters.
Thanks.
Okay. So number 3, did an adult or a person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you, or have you touched their body in a sexual way, or attempt or actually have oral, anal, vaginal intercourse with you? So for me, that was a no. So that's a 0. So out of 3, I have 2. Number 4, did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or that your family didn't look out for each other or feel close to or support each other? So for me, that was a yes. So out of 3, I have 4. One time again, when I was little, my mom told me that when she found out she was pregnant with me, that she prayed that she would lose me. Now that could be true for a lot of different reasons. You have too many kids to begin with and you can't deal with these little rugrats, and you're having another one, or you don't have enough money to feed all these mouths, and now you got another one. So there's a lot of reasons why somebody could think that, but they really shouldn't say that to their child, because it has the effect on them, or it could have the effect on them, like it did with me, that you think every problem that ever happened in the household was your fault. You weren't wanted anyway. And maybe that's the reason why your mom and dad fight all the time, and this happens, because you weren't wanted and you're here. There was no affection in our home. There was no hugs, no kisses, and I was always starved for affection. One of my other nicknames was the leech. And growing up, we had an above the ground pool that I used to swim in all the time. I loved to swim. And we lived out in the country. There wasn't much else to do. So I would swim every chance I get. And if anybody ever came into the pool with me, I would swim up to them and latch on to them. And I call it snuggle with a struggle, but I would latch on to them and get a hug. And I remember being pushed away from people, or actually kicked away from people, or one time actually picked up and thrown across the pool to get me away from them. I was always trying to be a good kid when I was growing up. And I remember I was good in school, and I remember bringing home a report card that had all B's on it, and I was happy with it. I brought home the report card. And back then, you brought home a piece of paper report card, and I brought it home to my mom and dad, and I showed them I got all B's, and they said, my dad goes, why didn't you get any A's? And I'm like, okay, well, I go back and I'm trying harder, and I get all A's. And I brought that report card home, and I was excited because they want to, maybe somebody will be proud of me, maybe. So I brought the report card home, and with all A's on it, my dad looked at me and he goes, you can't get an A+? And I'm like, what? Nothing was ever good enough. And you have some kids that will, like in my case, I just tried harder. But you have some kids that say, fuck it, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not trying at all. And they quit. None of the other kids in my family ever graduated high school. I was the only one that ever graduated high school. And I was the only one that ever went to college.
Kathy, there's a question.
Sure.
So for question number 4, how would that differentiate from, say, someone being the black sheep of the family? Would that fall under that question, or how are they different?
I would imagine it would be the same, because if you're the black sheep in your family, you feel that nobody loved you, or thought you were important or special, or that you were trouble, or that you were always in trouble. So that made you feel other than, yeah, like you weren't, it's kind of like when parents play favorites with their kids. That other kid that's not the favorite feels a certain kind of way and feels like nobody loves them. I hope that answered it.
Thank you.
Okay, so 4, so I have 3 out of 4. Question number 5. Did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, had no one to protect you, or that your parents were too drunk or too high to take care of you or take you to the doctors if you needed it? So for me, that was a yes. So that's another one. So out of 4, I have 5. So when I was growing up, we never went to the doctors. You went to get your vaccinations, to go to school, and that's it. Don't look sick, don't act sick, don't ask to go to the doctors because you're not going. I remember for every illness we ever had, headache, stomach ache, fever, and toothache, don't laugh, their answer for that was to go into the bathroom, stick your finger down your throat, and throw up. Every illness. I don't know where they got their medical degree from. I don't recommend going to that school, but it doesn't work. And imagine you have a headache and somebody's making you throw up. Your headache is just splitting. I only went to the dentist one time as a kid, And that was because I had a toothache so bad that I couldn't handle it. And they made me throw up repeatedly, trying to get rid of this headache. And it didn't work. So they eventually took me to the dentist where they pulled the tooth out. My father was drunk every night of my childhood up until the age of 18. And I don't mean he just had a couple drinks. I mean, he was tore up, drunk. My job, one of my jobs as a kid, was when my dad finished his quart of Iron City beer, my job was when he rolled it to me on the floor, my job was to pick up that quart of Iron City, the empty, throw it in the trash, go get him another quart, take the lid off of it and hand it to him. My other job was to turn the channel on the TV because there was no remotes back then. So that was my whole purpose as a childhood. I'm a tomboy now. I was a tomboy growing up. And one time I remember playing over my neighbor's house and we were doing something in the basement. I guess it was raining or something because we were in the basement jumping over things. And I caught my head on a piece of ductwork, metal ductwork, and I laid my head open. And if you know anything about the vascular system of your head bleeds a lot if you're cut. So I'm covered in blood, I'm bleeding, and the kids take me home. And I know I'm not going to the hospital, but I guess they wanted me to stop bleeding on their house. So I went home, they dropped me off in front of my mom and dad, and my dad said, "It'll stop." Well, yeah, when you're empty, it'll stop, but I was never taken to the hospital for that. So out of 4, I have 5. So number 6. Was a biological parent ever lost to you through divorce, abandonment, or other reason? So for me, that was a no, because fortunately or unfortunately, they stayed together. So that's a 0. So I have 4 out of 6. Number 7. Was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Or sometimes often or very often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard, or ever repeatedly hit over at least a few minutes or threatened with a gun or knife? So for me, that was a yes. So that's another one. So out of 5, I have 5 out of 7. So my mom and dad fought a lot. And when I talk about fighting, that means my mom got her ass beat. My mom was beaten so badly one time that her whole entire backside was black and blue. And I know it because she showed me. And when they would fight, I remember one of my most vivid memories as a child was when they would fight, I would cry and throw shoes at the bedroom door and bang on the bedroom door with my fists, crying and screaming, "Leave my mom alone." So that's one of my most vivid memories as a childhood, of childhood. So out of 5, I have 7. Out of 7, I have 5, sorry. Question number 8. Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic or who used street drugs? So for me, that was a yes. So that's another one. So I have 6 out of 8. My father was an alcoholic, like I said, who was drunk every night of my childhood up until the age of 18. And when I told you about when he slapped me in the face, knocked me down, followed me up the steps, lit the book of matches, threw them in my room, he was drunk. The next day, my mom told him what he did, and he had no memory of that whatsoever because he was in a blackout. That day, he stopped drinking and never drank again. And I want to tell you something about my father, and I'm not trying to make excuses for him. My father was a Marine who served in World War II, and he was injured in combat. So he probably had PTSD. And back then, they really didn't diagnose it, and they didn't treat it. So he probably came home and treated it himself. My older brother was a heroin addict for 30 years. And he was in the Navy, and he served in Vietnam. My brother's a lot older than me. And he came from my family, so he probably had double PTSD. And my oldest sister was an alcoholic and used street drugs. And I found out that her A score was an 8. My brother, my older brother, we were talking about this when I was working on this, and she had told me that she had been sexually assaulted by my oldest brother when she was a child. Now, I could have lived the rest of my life without knowing that because I didn't know it, but my brother told me that because I think he thought it was safe because my oldest brother had passed away the year before. So I have 6 out of 8. Question 9. Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member ever attempt suicide? So for me, that was a yes. So that's another one. So I have 7 out of 9. My sister, who was the alcoholic and used street drugs, who had the A score of 8, committed suicide at the age of 34. And I was actually the one who took the call from the police telling my parents that she had passed away. So out of 7, out of 9, I have 7. And the last question, question 10, did a household member ever go to prison? So again, for me, that's a yes. So that's another one. So out of 10, I have 8. My brother, the veteran, the heroin addict, who was 15 years older than I with an A score of 7, was in prison for 15 years. So my A score is an 8, and I was staff. Can you imagine what the scores of our patients are? And some of their scores and some of their stories make mine look like, what are you complaining about, Kath? Because you had it good. You always lived in the same house. You never had your lights turned off. You weren't sexually abused. Your parents stayed together. You had it good. And compared to some of their stories, I really did have it good. So now you got your score. So now what? That's the big score. So now what? So if you could, we're going to upload your score, and we'll just see where everybody's at. And we can do that. And you can do that while I can continue to talk about resilience. So your A score, the higher your A score, the higher your risk of health and social problems. And when children are overloaded with stress hormones, they're in flight, fight, or freeze mode. So when I was a kid growing up in that house, I had just gotten my adult front teeth, my 2 front teeth. I was about 7 or 8. I don't know how old you are when you get your 2 front teeth. But I would wake up every morning and my 2 front teeth were completely loose in my head. And I'm like, I didn't understand what was going on. And I knew I wasn't going to ask my mom and dad because all they would do was make you go throw up. That was their answer for everything. But the reason my teeth were loose in my head, my adult teeth, was because I was grinding my teeth so bad every night that my teeth were loose. You know how hard you got to grind your teeth for your teeth to be loose? That if you look at my teeth today, the 2 front ones are caps thanks to the dental program of the state of New Jersey. But if you look at my bottom teeth, they are ground down pretty far. They are chipped up. They look like if you cut a tree down, you can see the rings in a tree. That's what my teeth look like. And it's so bad that I still, at 60 years of age, have to wear a mouth guard every time I go to sleep because I still grind my teeth. Because that stuff that happens to you as a kid is still in there somewhere. And it still affects you.
Hey, Jen, can we share the poll results? Do we have to end it on our end first? Oh, there we go. There we go.
Can you go to the bottom of because it stops at 7. I just didn't know how many people were 8. So.
Oh, sorry, we can't hear you, Jen.
Sorry. Okay, can you see there was 1 9 and no 10s?
Okay.
Okay.
And there was a quick question. Nowhere in the A score do I see verbal yelling. Is that correct? Or which question would that fall under?
I think that's the first one. where you're called names or you're, I think it's the first one. I'd have to go all the way back and that would mess me up.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. So like I said, when children are overloaded with stress hormones, they're in flight, fight, or freeze mode. They can't learn in school. They often have difficulty trusting adults or developing healthy relationships with peers. And to relieve anxiety, depression, guilt, shame, and or inability to focus, they turn to easily available biochemical solutions such as nicotine, alcohol, marijuana, methamphetamine, and heroin, or activities in which they can escape their problems, which could be high-risk sports, multiple sex partners, and overwork or overachievement. So when I was a lot younger, in my early 20s, I drank a lot. I started working at the factory, and the girls said, somebody said, who wants to go out to the bar? And I'm like, oh yeah, let's go. I'll be the designated drunk driver. So I was drinking, hitting it pretty hard. And then a new group of girls came to the work at the factory, and they like to do methamphetamine. Crank is what we called it back then. And who would like to do some crank? And I'm like, okay, here, I'll do some. And my thing was I was in for 50, but I was going to do a lot more than 50. So with my A score of an 8 and me starting down that road of drinking and drugging, I could have very easily ended up, I'm going to say Larch B, with all the rest of the patients there, tearing it up, because that's where I was headed. It really was. With my history and my drinking and my drug use, I was headed down that road. But thank God I stopped that a long time ago. But when you stop that, you have to fill this void with something. And I filled it with work. So I worked at Ancora for 34 years. My staff half the time had to tell me to go home, because a lot of times I would stop, I would stay, and I would continue to work past my 7 hours, 7.5 hours, 8 hours. And then I would come home, and I have a farm with, right now I have 13 horses, 2 dogs, crazy cat lady cats, that it's hard for me to sit still and do nothing. Because when you sit still and do nothing, you think. And you think about all the things that you don't have any control over, or that happened in the past that you can't change, but you still think about. So that's why I keep busy. So I'm always, like I said, it's very hard for me to sit still and do nothing. I'm always striving for perfection, because that's what I would do when I was a kid. Because maybe if I was great at something, somebody would love me. Maybe if I got that A, my dad would stop drinking, my parents would stop fighting. Now I do it because it makes me feel good about me. I no longer need anyone else to validate me. And as a child, my father had always done things on our farm that were half-assed and slapped together. And now I do things the right way so I can be proud of myself, which I am. My father lived to be 60 days before his 85th birthday. And up until and including the day he died, I was waiting for him and wanting him to tell me that he loved me and that he was proud of me. And he never did. Kids need to hear that all the time, that you love them, that you're proud of them, and that you think that they can accomplish anything. They need that. But your A score is not an absolute predictor of someone's future. The A score does not tally the positive experiences in life that can help build resilience and protect the child from the effects of trauma. Having a grandparent who loves you, a teacher who understands you and believes in you, or a trusted friend you can confide in can mitigate the long-term effects. So I had 2 positive people in my life prior to age 18, and neither one of them were in my family. My family's very negative. Everybody. One of the positive people in my life was a 10th grade math teacher. He actually gave me a suspension, 1-day suspension for my foul mouth, which I think woke me up a little bit. He saw something in me that I did not see in myself, Because if you hear that you're stupid or a fuck up long enough or often enough, you begin to believe it. And I believed it. This teacher encouraged me and he said many positive things to me. Positive things are difficult for me to hear. I can take a cut better than a compliment, always could. He told me to stop doubting myself and he encouraged me to go to college. No one, like I said, in my immediate family, 5 other kids or 2 parents had ever gone to college and they didn't finish high school. The other person, positive person in my life was my school bus driver. She would pick me up at school and drop me off at the house. And I would sit right behind her on the bus and talk to her the whole way home. She would always stop at the house and give me the opportunity to get out. And I, most of the time, didn't take it. I stayed on the bus with her and rode with her, dropping the rest of the kids off. We would drop the bus off. I would go to her house and I would hang out with her for the rest of the day. And it's not that she was such an amazing person, but she didn't call me names. She didn't make fun of me. And we just talked like what I imagined decent people talked about. She was a strong working woman who was respected by the other kids on the bus and by the people she worked with. She was a positive female role model for me. My mother was not a positive role model for me. She didn't work. She didn't clean the house on a regular basis, and she wasn't a good cook, and nothing was ever good enough for her. She was a very negative person. Another positive person in my life was a psychologist whom I sought out at the age of 29. I was just separated from my husband and I went to counseling in the hope to get my husband and I back together. The man I had married was an alcoholic, like my father had been, because you go with what you know, what you're comfortable with. And what I was comfortable with was dysfunction. My counselor listened to me and my childhood history. He had me read a book entitled Adult Children of Alcoholics, and he helped me understand why I did the things I did, why I chose to become a nurse, and why I gravitated to the people I did. I became more aware of who I was, and more importantly, why. And he helped me to learn to try to make better choices. So resilience builds throughout life, and close personal relationships are key. They can make all the difference. And you can be that positive person in somebody's life that can give them that hope that things could be different. So if you look at the screen we're looking at now, this is the trauma-related, says trauma-related outcomes. And it says people who have experienced trauma are 4 times more likely to become an alcoholic, 4 times more likely to develop a sexually transmitted disease, 4 times more likely to inject drugs, 3 times more likely to use antidepressant medicine because they're 3 times more likely to experience depression, 3 times more likely to be absent from work, 15 times more likely to commit suicide, 2.5 times more likely to smoke tobacco, 3 times more likely to have serious job problems. So they are the possible outcomes. It doesn't mean that I don't smoke cigarettes, so that's one more thing I have to do. It's just a possible outcome of having these adverse childhood experiences. So we talked about resilience and how having someone positive in your life can help, having someone that you can go to and talk to. And in my 5 previous years of doing this presentation to the staff of Ancora, there are so many people out there, staff, and I'm talking about staff, who have these issues, who have adverse childhood experiences. And some of their scores are the same as mine, and some of them are higher than mine. And they are dealing with what life has dealt them. And they're also having to now try to help our patients. So it's just know that resilience is possible. It's important that we can help. We are there to help each other. And by identifying your ACE score is just the first step in I would call it recovery, because you might not be using substances to deal with what happened to you as a kid, but you are still dealing with what happened to you as a kid. That's it.
Okay. So we're going to switch back. So one of the last things that we have is a video that is, hopefully it'll play here, only a few minutes long, and 5 minutes long. So we're going to take about 5 minutes to play this video. And then at that time, we will open it up last 10 minutes for any kind of questions or points of discussion that you all would like to address. Oh, it's not working. And my thumbnail isn't going to work now.
Dawn, if you want me to share my screen, I can play the video.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen.
No problem. Nope. I see the problem. Hold on. There we go. You see?
Jen, we're not hearing it. I think it might be because you're on mute.
Hold on one second. Okay, I'm going to start this over. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it.
My parents don't understand. All the drinking and fighting means I'm scared. I'd like a cuddle, perhaps a bedtime story, but mostly I'd like them to stop shouting. And sometimes they hit me. Feeling scared every day and not feeling loved or wanted will change me for the rest of my life. Later, I'll have problems at school, problems with alcohol, and I'll get in trouble with the police. What's happening to me right now means I'm more likely to have serious health problems in middle age and die sooner than I should. Doctors say my life is full of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. But in my world, this means I see my dad hitting my mum. Dad's got a drinking problem, and Mum's always crying, even with the tablets. I am always being shouted at and hit. After the booze and fags, there's not a lot of money for toys or clothes, or even food. I'm getting used to being scared all the time. Now I'm just angry. The doctors say things are changing inside me. My brain isn't learning how to control my feelings properly. My body can't relax like those kids who don't have ACEs, so my body won't be able to repair itself properly when I get older, making it more likely I'll get cancer or heart disease as an adult. It hurts when my parents hit me, but the real damage is hidden, and that damage will be with me for life.
I drink and smoke. They say I'm out of control, but I'm not. It's just my way of coping with my aces. I've been in plenty of fights, but what's wrong with that? Kids' punches don't hurt half as much as when my dad hits me. I beat up a kid last week at school because he looked at me weird. Who cares? I ended up with more time out of school. Learning's not for me anyway, and the teachers don't care any more than my parents. I don't like the way anyone looks at me except my girl. She's 16 and pregnant, just like my mum was with me.
So this is where I've ended up. I've got diabetes and cancer's probably on the way. I know these kill you, but I couldn't do without them. I've never had a proper job and I've spent time inside. I hate my kids. I hate their mum too, until she left, so my kids have grown up with aces. And now my daughter had her first kid. She's 16. The course of my life was set in the wrong direction a long time ago. I know where I'm heading, and sadly I know where my kids are heading too. This doesn't have to happen. A little help in childhood makes a big difference to where life takes you. When I was a baby, the nurses noticed that my mum wasn't coping and helped her and explained how important my childhood is to the rest of my life. So, with a bit of help, she coped. The police came round after next door complained about the noise from Mum and Dad fighting. They asked how I was feeling. I told them I was scared all the time. Mum and Dad got help. The shouting got better and the hitting stopped. I even got some bedtime stories. I still had problems at school, but the teacher asked me about what was happening at home. I got help controlling my feelings. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. I'm now married with 2 children, and I've got a job, most of the time. I haven't repeated the same problems with my kids. We got help when being a parent got too much. Our children are ace-free, and that means their kids stand a good chance of growing up ace-free as well. Almost half the people in England and Wales experienced 1 ace as a child, and 1 in 10 of us suffered 4 or more aces. If we stop aces, millions of children would not become smokers or binge drinkers, and levels of violence in adults would be cut in half. Fewer aces in childhood also means fewer adults developing diseases like cancer, heart disease and diabetes in middle age. We all need to be ace aware. Are you? Doctors, police, nurses, teachers, firefighters and most importantly parents. The more you know about aces, the more you can help stop children growing up with aces in their lives. And for those of you who have already suffered aces, the more you know, the more you can help yourself and others who have suffered aces cope.
Do you want to reshare yours, Dawn?
Sure thing.
So that's all I have, guys. Does anybody have any questions for me? All right, so raise their hand. So what do I do?
Hello.
Hi, how are you, Juan?
I just unmuted you.
How you doing? First, I'd like to commend you for sharing your story. I think the video was very useful as far as showing the transition that one has. Can you hear me?
No, Juan, speak louder, please.
I said first, I would like to first commend you for sharing your story along with your teaching.
Thank you very much.
Pretty sure, like you were saying, most of us could have shared or identified with some of the stuff that you shared, along with the people that we serve. Thank you for the presentation, the video, the visual, which is a very important piece for me today. As a visual learner, that kind of like broke down the process of what happens in the person's life. For me, in that whole video that you just showed, I think the most important piece when it comes to the ACEs and trauma-informed care, for me, I'm speaking for me, it would be more or less the education as far as the parents is concerned, and also allowing the individuals who's going through that process that we as professionals are here to listen. Like you were saying earlier, how the bus driver was played the most important part. And initially it started off with her being able to listen and not be judgmental, and more or less, I don't know if you was able to converse with her. In fact, maybe she was able to identify your situation as her.
Well, we never talked about it then. Back then, you don't share secrets.
No, I'm talking about as far as her, and as you know, because I mean, there are some good people in this world.
Sure there are.
And a lot of times, I'm speaking for me, like when I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I kind of shared what the individual was saying in that cartoon about the fact that, you know, I want to be that individual to show my daughter something that my father never did, which was never be there. So I can identify with what you were saying about your father. And as a person today, I make a commitment to myself that I will try my best not to be that person my father was to me, to try to stop that cycle.
Yeah, that's the most important thing you can do is do better for your children than your parents did for you.
Correct. And that's something
that once you know, knowledge is power.
Yes. And I think that's something important for us to get across to the patient, the client, whatever you serve, is more or less, you know, we have to try our best to deal with adversity with the hopes of resiliency. You know, I guess on our level, it's just basically to listen, to coach and encourage, you know, that it is possible. So thanks for sharing that today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Juan.
Thanks, Juan. Kathy, there's another question. How did you become so comfortable sharing your story with everyone?
I've always given too much information about myself. I've never had a problem talking about myself. And once I did some research, it started when Samsha did a presentation for us in our gym. And they had 2 people come down 2 different times and tell their story. And that really hit home for me. And then I did some more research on my own. And it was never in my intention to have this go where it went. But I think it's important. And it did. I don't want to tell you a lie, but I think this has helped me also. My husband might have something different to say about that, but I think it has helped me. And it is, if I can help one other person deal with what they've been through, or hopefully in the future, help teachers identify little kids that are going through this so that that they can get help before they turn into whatever this mess I am now, you know, turn into that. Because I'm angry all the time, whether even on a good day, it's there. Just like that little kid in the video, he was angry. And I see my niece, what I do is I see my nieces, great nieces now, running around, and they're so joyful. And I just think to myself, what would I have been like if I could have had a different upbringing? And if I could help just one person, that would be enough for me.
Okay, we have time for one more quick question. Michelle, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi.
I love you, Michelle.
I love you more. How you doing? It's more of a statement than a question. Is kind of like follows on the same line as Juan with the parenting. Fortunately, I had the benefit of doing this training with Kathy. So, I mean, the presentation was good online, but it's so much more better in person. But what I came away from with doing this, and Juan, he hit on it, is like, you know, you always want to do better than your parents, but still you know, I don't know about anybody else as a parent, but you have in your head when you made that transition and you know you did better than your parents, you think your kids are okay. But I took the leap a couple of months ago and I did the ACEs with my grown daughters. And it was scary because, you know, you want to think that you're a perfect parent, but having the communication open, like I told them, like we do in training, don't tell me what you answered yes to, let's just discuss the score. And of course, in my head, they were supposed to have zeros, but in reality, they didn't have zeros. But doing enough work on myself, I was okay with it because the most important thing was for us to have the communication about what they saw as their trauma, because I could look at it. Doing this training with Kathy got me to see like what I perceived as trauma might not be what someone else's, but that doesn't take away that it was traumatic for them. And that so helped me so much with my daughters to have the open communication to allow them to be able to talk about what their ACEs was. And it was so, so rewarding. And I just wanted to just give that experience to those that are on here as far as personal. Like, I'm so glad. I was so reluctant to do it, but I was so happy that I did do it because now we're having conversations about trauma and they want to know more and they want to know, you know, how they can address different things in their life. So I owe a lot of that to you, Kathy. So I wanted to thank you in front of everyone, allowing me to be vulnerable enough to be willing to go there with myself, because you went there with yourself, you know, and if you could do it, then I could do it. And so it's helping to stop the generational trauma in my personal family by being able to talk about it. So I just wanted to say that. It's so helpful, not only in work, but in my personal experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I know Angela had her hand up. Before I unmute you, Angela, and we'll just take 2 more minutes to answer a question, I wanted to point you guys in the direction of the survey that I posted. I posted it in the chat, and I'll also send you an email by tomorrow morning at the latest with that information in it. From that training evaluation, it's a quick survey about today's presentation, but at the bottom of it, you can receive, you can download the ACEs questionnaire, you can download handouts of today's presentation, and also you can get a certificate of completion to say that you attended this webinar. Also, as I posted earlier, the link to the Rutgers free website, the video and the recording of this presentation will be posted there by tomorrow. All right, so I'm gonna unmute Angela, if she's still here. Angela, I think Angela left. I'm sorry. Well, Angela, you're still here. Do you want to talk? Angela, are you there? You're unmuted.
I'm good.
Okay, thanks. I didn't want to skip over you. Okay. Any other questions? Kathy, we want to thank you so much for being here today and doing this presentation. It's so important. There was a question that Kathleen had about wanting to show this to their child's school and what a great presentation this could be for teachers and educators and the school system, so they know what effect and impact they have on the children they teach.
If there are, I'm sorry, it's Dawn talking off screen and shouting across Kathy. I'm very sorry for that. If you do have any questions, or if you would like to get in contact with Kathy and maybe you didn't work with her and so you don't have her direct contact information, please feel free to contact me and I will connect you. I'm going to put my email address in the chat. Actually, let's put Kathy's in there. She will type it in. And you can contact her directly should you have any kind of requests.
Friday, you know, she said that so one thing.
I don't see it. There we go. Okay, there it is. So we want to be respectful of everyone's time. You know, we try to end by 4 o'clock. So thank you for those sticking around a few extra minutes to get the information. Please go do your training evaluation, download the materials and the training resources, and we'll see you next month on the webinar next month is on criminogenic thinking from Dr. Morphy from Trenton Psychiatric Hospital. So we'll see you next month at the prep webinar. Thanks all for coming.
Bye. Thank you.